we come to the next part, which is the connection code. The connection code sets all the procedures for connecting new plants to the transmission system or connecting new distribution areas to the transmission system. So users which apply for a new connection point to the transmission system. In addition, it sets some requirements for the equipment to be installed there. And that's why it's also applicable to the existing connections in order to comply with other parts of the code, like the water metering or the water quality code, which we will see later during the task here. This slide is now known to you. Just to remind ourselves, the objective of the code is really to assist the users and new users in the connection process, giving guidelines to provide transparency for such a process. Since a connection is a result for a project development, the developer of a project, regardless whether this is a governmental entity or a private entity, he needs to have some security, timelines, otherwise development of new projects is not attractive to anybody. It applies to the TSO, of course. These users want to connect to the transmission system. And of course, all the users which then either develop plants or transmission systems. The code sets out the technical and design and operational requirements that each user shall comply with, where his facility is then eventually connected to the desalinated water transmission system. And it provides all parties with the procedural and formal requirements for this connection process. The connection code defines the connection point. This is a distinctive point between the user and the transmission system, or in a special case, also between the desalinated water plant, water producers, and the plant-connected consumers. The connection point considers basically two interface points or type of interface points, where the location of this interface point is shifted during the process. During installation, the interface point is at a different location compared to the operational process. So this interface point defines the boundary during the period for the responsibilities between the user and the TSO, of course. Interface point 1 is basically the location of the interface up to the date of the connection certificate. When the connection certificate is handed over, it will be moved slightly, and we see this during for the next slides, to which point it will be moved. At the connection point, certain equipment shall be installed, or required to be installed, and the configuration for the connection point between the users and the desalinated water plants, between the water producers and the desalinated water transmission system, looks like as sketched here. We have the plant on the left end, then there is a shut-off valve. Next one is a backup meter, and we have an online water quality monitoring system. There will be a sampling point. There will be a pressure indicator, of course. There's the main meter, and then there is another shut-off valve here. You see, there are two sets of meter, main and backup. there is an online monitoring system for water quality and a sampling point for analyzer taking samples and analyzing samples through a laboratory. In the beginning, the interface point during installation erection is here. In other words, the transmission system provides at the connection point just a shut-off valve, and this then, when he has installed it, can be closed with a blind flange. So his system is still operational as long this party here brings all the other equipment, is ready for really physically getting connected with the transmission system. And then, when during the operational period, when the certificate is handed over, connection point will be shifted here. Why is this shift foreseen in the code? During operation, we wanted to have both parties getting data from certain equipment. So we wanted to have the transmission system, in that case, operating the main meter and owning the main meter, while the backup meter is owned and operated by the desalination plant operator or desalinated water producer, in order to double check the results of that meter. We believe, the code believes, this provides transparency for the purpose of data exchange and verifying data and performance of the equipment at the connection point. Similar with the water quality analyzers, online monitoring system is at the desalinated water producers, and they shall own and operate it, exchange the data with the transmission system operator. The transmission system operator shall do on a frequent basis the samples, analyzing the samples taken from the system in order to first double check online monitoring results, but also provide other data and other results from analyzers which cannot be done online. Similar setup is at the interface point between the new distribution system and the transmission system. Here as well, we have shut-off meter, we have a backup meter, online monitoring system, sampling point, pressure indicator, again a meter, main meter in that case, and a shut-off valve. Simple setup.
Here, about sampling, only one. What's the reason behind this?
Under the code, only one is required. If you, for your internal business, want to have an additional sampling point at that end, it's up to you. You can install. The code does not prevent to even install more equipment than what is required. This is minimum requirement. So one shall be there. If you want to have your own, you're free to have your own sampling point.
Yeah, but purpose for double checking, cross check.
Usually, see, the online monitoring equipment will be installed and then it runs continuously. The samples, usually you take 1 or 2 samples and then you send it maybe to 2 laboratories. Mm-hmm. And you do a double checking, you can do the double checking on the same sample point.
Including the online.
And the laboratories usually are certified, and of course mistakes can happen there as well. But this is different than to the online monitoring system where you run the things continuously.
Yeah, but this information is included in online monitoring. That's been all chemicals online.
Yes.
That's been it's already double checked.
See, otherwise you have to install all of the equipment double, which when we drafted the code with a committee representing all the users, it was found to be not appropriate to have the online monitoring double, backup and main, and the sampling points double. So the concept, the committee has made was on the metering, yes, main and backup, but on the monitoring of the water quality, there's one online and one sample point, and this should be it.
Now between transmission and distribution, sometimes it's very long area between the transmission, like here the city feeders. High point terminals, there we have there is a meter. And the distributor, they have the end. You mean this long distance, or you need at the end of the pipe we should have?
Usually the connection point is a single point, and what we see here should be installed within maybe a 10 meters distance, not more. This would be the ideal situation. The city feeders are of headaches, from my perspective, without taking position for the one or the other party. Since years, I hear that the city feeders is a special case and it's so difficult because the interface is not really clarified or whatsoever. But every time I hear the city feeders, I believe in order to make a clear cut, NWC, MOVE, and SWCC, they really have to sit down together and decide to whom the city feeders shall belong in future, and where will this distinctive interface in order to have a clear cut. I don't want to say the city feeders have to be handed over from SWEC to MOVE, NWC, or whatsoever, but the situation as it is too complicated here in Riyadh, especially for the city feeders. And anytime when we discuss this point, I hear the city feeders. Means the situation here is not clear cut, because this is clear cut. There you have exactly one location. Up to this, it's one party's responsibility. Downstream of that point, it's the other's responsibility. And this is what a code want to achieve. Yeah, I can't give a proper solution right now. The only thing is my advice to solve it, and solve it quickly in a way to do something on that front, not only discuss around that it's difficult. All right, the connection procedure considers 7 main steps. If you go through the code, you see a flow chart, how communication will be done and which decision needs to be taken here and there. And it's a rather complicated flow chart. We tried to simplify it here for the purpose of the presentation and to give you a first good overview. In the first instance, there's an application form which will be provided by the users to the TSO. In the second step, there is a system study which needs to be done by the TSO in order to identify whether the system can take the capacity offered by the new user, or can supply the capacity which the new distributor demands. When the TSO believes, yes, this is a good idea, he will send an offer to connection to this user, which contains also the draft connection agreement. And here either the user can accept or will not accept that offer of connection. In the end, when he accepts, he will enter into connection agreement, and this provides the security for both sides. Yes, the user has an agreement to connect his facility to the transmission system. He can continue his development, installation of the facility, get money from funds and whatsoever. Then he will do the installation and commissioning. When he's ready, he will say, look, TSO, I'm ready to connect. At the date of connection, when the TSO has reviewed all the documentation and the physical installation and is happy with everything, he will then provide the connection certificate. From that on, the interface and the connection point is under operation. So the first task here in principle is based on a standard format which will be provided by the TSO, for instance. And this format contains several information like name of the applicant and as well preliminary water planning data. These preliminary water planning data contain, for instance, capacity, location of the interface, etc., which is required by the TSO for the second step, to run the system studies. Once the application form is provided, within 30 days, the user will get a notification back from the TSO. He has received the application, and that in principle this is accepted. The application is accepted, or it's not accepted at all. So in order to monitor the process, it is important that both parties know after 30 days, I know where I stand. So when this is in principle accepted, then system studies will be carried out by the transmission system operator. It's clear and stated in the code that the cost for these system studies will be paid by the applicant in order to avoid disputes. The system studies will check the hydraulic system, the flows, whether the transmission system can take the capacity offered at that connection point in that time, or whether the transmission system can supply the requested demand to the distribution system at that point in that time, which is required and stated in the application format. Then, once the results of the system studies are positive, the TSO will prepare an application, an offer of connection. And this shall be done after 90 days of the application acceptance date. And it's also assumed that payment of the system studies will be done by the applicant. The offer of connection specifies equipment at interface points, specifies other requirements there, and it shall be valid for 180 days. It contains also a draft connection agreement between the applicant and the TSO to be entered into once the offer of connection is accepted by the applicant. Connection agreement will then be finalized and then signed by the applicant and the TSO. And this agreement also contains committed water planning data. The number and type of data in detail required is stated in the code. It may happen that these depart slightly from each other or is further developed, and it's really for the purpose of designing, doing the detailed design of the equipment at the connection point for the purpose of the applicant can install his facility up to the connection point. Through the connection agreement, the applicant also declares that he will in compliance with the seawater desalination code, and also the responsibilities, as explained earlier, are set out at both parts of the both sides of the connection point. Then in the fifth period, fifth task is simply the installation of the facility, installation of the equipment at the connection point. And once this is all in place and commissioned and flushed and cleaned, then the applicant, the user, can state, look, I'm ready, I prepared my equipment, installed my equipment, and submits a readiness to connect statement to the TSO. That readiness to connect statement again contains data which are the connected water data, as also detailed included in the code. The TSO reviews the readiness to connect statement, reviews the data, looks whether the equipment installed is fine or not, and then will provide the connection certificate to the user, to the applicant. From that time on, the applicant will become a user under the code and can basically run his facility subject to the license of ECRA. There is one requisite to have connection certificate from the TSO, but also if you have a new desalination plant under ECRA's mandate, you have to get a license for ECRA for this plant. Again, summarizing the connection activities which has to be done by the applicant user. This is in principle commissioning the applicant user's facility, coordination of the interface with the TSO at the connection points, then also installation of all the equipment, water metering data, water metering system, online monitoring system, or other equipment which the system studies requires. Inspection and testing of the equipment and the preparation of the test reports. Now, a special case would be if there is a plant-connected consumer. An entity or party not connected to the transmission system. For such a connection, of course, the TSO don't need to know all the details and the procedures and the agreements between these parties. However, the capacity would be of interest in order to make the planning of the overall system, because capacity the plant-connected consumer is getting from a desalination plant would not be available to the wider transmission system. That's why the code says for the connection between a desalinated water producer and the plant connection consumer, they may set up their own procedures and formats and whatsoever. They may agree on a bilateral basis how they develop this connection. However, whenever there is a connection agreement signed by both parties, a copy of this one shall be sent to the transmission system operator in order to know that there is a connection and in order to know technical details, especially the capacity. We talked around the connection code and the connection procedure. This is just a small case study. Again, if there is, for instance, an IWPP developing a new project, they will submit the application form with the details listed in here. And after 30 days, SWCC, as the transmission system operator, will tell them, look, it's not accepted or it's accepted on a case-by-case basis. They will run through the system studies. If the transmission system operator cannot accept that application, then they have to notify, of course, the applicant and give reasons for the non-acceptance. If it's accepted, then and the system studies are provide a positive result, the TSO will prepare an offer of connection and submit it to the applicant. Non-acceptance, of course, may lead to dispute. And this is also stated in the code how to deal with disputes in that respect. First of all, there will be notification from SWEC to the IWPP. Then the IWPP says, and for instance, one of the reasons could be, look, I cannot take your proposed capacity at that time. For instance, my system can only take 100,000 cubic meter more. you said you want to install 1 million, it's not going to happen, and especially not from beginning of next year. So they may then agree on another location or capacity and start the process again, or the IWPP simply does not accept this objections and then has a dispute with SWCC. Finally, when there is a dispute, again there's reference to the dispute resolution process under the electrical law. In summary, the code sets out the procedures, the code sets out the installation of equipment, which is also important for the existing connections. And despite of the shutoff valve at the transmission system, the remaining equipment will basically be provided by the applicant user. Each application, if accepted, will be followed by a system study, which has to be paid by the applicant. And of course, inspection, testing, and metering, and witnessing of the equipment, and the production of the equipment, installation of the equipment, shall be done by the applicant. In case such, during the procedure, the applicant modifies his water planning data significantly, this may lead to restart of the procedure again. This is just a note I want to highlight here, end of the summary.